Hello everyone, welcome back to Optimize FPL. We are going to be taking a look at all of the price reveals for the new game. We're looking forward to it. I think it's going to come out, the official release is probably going to be tomorrow, so I think it's a good time to look at the prices, see what we're thinking, and at the end of the video I'm going to look at a quick draft that I've made. So let's take a look. Okay, so we're just going to be watching the price reveals. I'll just pause whenever I need to pause it. So we're going to start with Bournemouth. Pretty simple. Solanke, 6.0, decent. Tavares, 4.5. Zamora, 4.5. Lots of 4.5 defenders. Not too much here at Bournemouth, to be honest. I'm not liking a whole lot. Solanke, potentially at 6 million, could potentially be a good forward option. More if he starts playing, maybe he could be a good option, but realistically, AFC Bournemouth, just nothing really too exciting for me. Their defenders are 4.5, but as we get onto the video, there's a lot of 4.5 defenders this season, so there's really nothing here that I think is too impressive. Let's move on to Arsenal now. Okay, so getting on to Arsenal, here's some of the players they got available. Saka, 8 million, I think is a great option. As we'll get into the video a little bit more, we'll see a lot of Arsenal players I think are great value this season. Coming up next, we have Odegaard at 6.5. Not something I'm too interested in, but we'll talk about that in a second. Ramsdale at 5 million, I think is a great option, but I'm not 100% sure considering that if we look at their defense, Tomiyasu 4.5, Ben White 4.5. Do we really want Ramsdale for 5 million when we can get Tomiyasu for 4.5? He'll get the same amount of games, most likely, unless injuries or some kind of rotation, but very unlikely. If you're worried about rotation with Tomiyasu, you bring in Ben White. He's going to play almost every single game unless Saliba comes back from, I think he's in like Montpellier or something like that for on loan from Arsenal. So I really doubt that though. I feel like Ben White probably is going to start most games. Same with Tomiyasu. The reason I said that Odegaard was not something that I was too interested in, you got Martinelli there at 6.0 million. I think that's a great option for the Arsenal attack. Saka I think is definitely the main target you'd want, but at 8 million he definitely you have to stretch a little bit to get to him, but I think that he has definitely nailed down that right wing position. I know they were looking at Rafinha at one point. That seems to be completely out of the realm of possibility. So I think Martinelli on the left wing could potentially be a good option. I think Saka definitely is going to start almost every single game with that right wing. I think they have definitely butchered Nketiah's price, 7 million. I know he started playing really well at the end of the season, but they're bringing in Gabriel Jesus. You're not paying 7 million for a backup striker. That doesn't make any sense. It'd be interesting to see how this Vieira kid gets on. I know he's had a lot of hype from, I believe he's from the Portuguese league, but I'm not 100% sure of that. He'd be someone to keep an eye out for, and Smith Rowe as well if he gets his place back in the team instead of potentially Odegaard or Martinelli. You can see a lot of rotation there, so that's why I'm a little bit worried about the Arsenal midfielders. Saka probably the best option, and the defense I think has great options. Tomiyasu, Ben White, great options from Arsenal here. Okay, moving on to Aston Villa. So we've got Coutinho here, 7 million, a decent price for him. I mean, like, if he gets to the form he had when he used to play for Liverpool, that'd be fantastic, and obviously it'd be worth a lot more. But at 7 million, their opening fixtures are like mediocre to decent. But I just don't think Aston Villa's attack is really something you want to be looking too much into. I mean, I feel like they just don't have a lot of FPL prowess, if that makes sense, or they're just like not very good players for FPL. Coutinho did have some good spots here and there last season. I think I overhyped him a little bit last season. I think that he's like coming back down to earth. Me thinking about it more realistically, I don't think he's a great option for the long term. Let's look at the other prices they got here. So they got Coutinho at 7 million, Watkins 7.5, a little bit too expensive in my opinion. Cash at 5 million is definitely somebody to keep an eye out for. I'll have to take a look at what their fixtures look like for cash because like 5 million is quite a lot for a defender this season at least. And you're looking at their team, it's got some decent players. I mean, Ramsey at 5.5, 4.5 million last year was definitely somebody you consider. 5.5, probably not this year just because of the other 5.5s they have available in the game. Diego Carlos coming in at 5 million, which I think is quite surprising. You'd think for most of the Aston Villa players, center backs, they come in at 4.5 million, but I guess because he's a new signing, people might be more inclined to take him on because it's a little bit more risky. So maybe that's why they're doing it for more of the casual players. But me and you both know we're not going to be picking Diego Carlos. Martinez at 5 million is also definitely interesting. I think that his 5.5 million last season was way too expensive. We all remember his 4.5 million season. That was fantastic. But yeah, no, 5 million I feel like is definitely more fair for him. Digne and Cash definitely. Both of those players are very reasonable prices, I think, in my opinion. 5 million. Cash could be something that you look for in your game week 1 team. They got pretty decent fixtures. I think they have like maybe one or two bad fixtures in between. They're good fixtures, but overall, I think that that's somebody you could definitely consider. Coutinho, Watkins, probably not players I'm going to be looking at for the near future. I mean, their prices are decent. I think Watkins might be a little bit overpriced. Could probably be more like a 7 million option, but when you think about the other people who are priced at 7.5 million, I think that's more reasonable. Okay, so to start off with the Brentford boys, we got Tony at 7 million. I mean, he did have a good season last season. Let's be honest. I think he ended up finishing like in the top 5 or 6 of the forwards last season. So I think a slight upgrade is it makes sense. It would have been nicer to see him at 6.5, just because I think that Brentford are probably going to have a second season syndrome, especially without Ericsson and um, I mean really just without Ericsson and yeah, I don't know. I just don't know how I feel about Tony at 7 million. He's definitely interesting. Someone to keep an eye on for. Maybe when their fixtures start turning a little bit better, you can start taking a little bit more of a punt on him. But 7 million, I think at the start of the game, it's a little bit too pricey for me personally. As we go on, Ray at 4.5. I'm going to pause it there actually. Ray at 4.5 is a great option, I think. I think between him and when we get to Brighton in a second, Sanchez are really going to be the two 4.5 million goalkeepers you look for this season. Um, Unless you want to go for a little bit more premium and go for a 5 million goalkeeper, which I think is definitely viable this season, but definitely not necessary. Ray at 4.5, a great option in my opinion with their fixture starting off. So yeah, definitely keep an eye out for Raya. Let's keep going. We got Raya at 4.5, Canos at 5 million. I mean, who is getting Canos at 5 million? That's just crazy. If you look at the rest of their team, realistically, are you getting any Brentford defenders at 4.5 million when there's so many more 4.5 million options out there? I don't really think so. I don't really know much about the Brentford defense, to be honest, other than the fact that Raya is a nailed starter. So I'm not looking at any of the defenders personally. Midfielder wise, Wissa, if he starts more games, potentially could be a good option. And Buemo and forward, I think is pretty unfortunate because I think that it sounds like from what I've read and heard that he's probably going to be playing more in a right wing back position or somewhere on the wings this season. So it might have just been better to keep him as a midfielder. At 6 million though, he's still a decent option. I mean, like if you just don't have the money to go up to like something like a 6.5 million or 7 million forward like Mitrovic or Tony, for example, then Embuemo could have potentially be an option. But I think for the 1 million price, you probably just go straight from Embuemo to Tony. I just think that you find the money somewhere else. I think it's worth it. I don't think Embuemo is worth the 6 million quite yet. Yeah, that's all for Brentford. Let's move on to Brighton now. Okay, so let's talk about their first defender they show. Cucurella, 5 million. I mean, it's a bit expensive in my opinion for a Brighton fullback. But I mean, he was really good last season. Very attacking, very decent player overall. So I mean, he could potentially come good, but I think that it's a little bit expensive. I think that if he went to Man City, he might be more worth it, but he'd probably be rotating a lot with Kyle Walker because I think Cancelo would probably play left and right back. He'd just be rotating between the two of them. So yeah, Cucurella probably only get like 50% of the time at Man City, so he probably would become a worse option. I think I actually don't really know. Maybe better, maybe worse, maybe somewhere in between. Maybe just be roughly the same. Somebody you're probably going to avoid. If we keep moving on to the video, they got Trossard here at 6.5. Completely ignoring him. I think 6.5 is way too expensive for Trossard. Sanchez, though, like I was talking about before, 4.5 million goalkeeper. Didn't get an upgrade from last season. I think that's a great price for him. Brighton's opening fixture is Manchester United, which is unfortunate, but I think their fixtures overall in the first 5 or 6 definitely look very decent. So Sanchez is definitely somebody to keep an eye out for. It's really between him and Raya for the starting position. If you're going for a 4.5 million goalkeeper, there's not really anybody else that competes. Maybe Henderson from Nottingham Forest. We'll get to that in a little bit, but honestly, not in my opinion. Sanchez, Raya. If you're going for a 4.5 million goalkeeper, those are the two players you should be looking at. Moving on to their defense and midfielder and forward options, there's a couple players here I actually do like the looks of. Dunk and Lamptey at 4.5 million. I think those are great FPL options. Lamptey, if he can stay fit, I think could be a great player. But honestly, I personally am looking at Dunk. I think that his attacking potential is definitely there. At 5 million, I don't think he was worth it, but at 4.5, he's nailed on that Brighton defense. And he's got the attacking potential on corners and set pieces. I think he's definitely somebody to keep an eye out for. In their midfield, I'm not looking at anybody to be honest, but in their forward line, Undav could be a very interesting player. He was one of the best goal scorers in the Belgian league history. I think he got like 25 or 30 goals last season with like 10 or 15 assists. Definitely someone to keep an eye out for. I don't think he'll have the starting position right off the bat, but I think he's definitely a good enabler at 5.5 million for a forward. You don't get many good forwards at that price point. Usually it's at 6.5 like Maupe we see there. and even Welbeck, which is a surprisingly high price, 6.5 million. I don't think he'll be starting as much as Undav, so I think that they definitely probably got those backwards in my opinion, but they don't know what Undav can bring, so I guess that's probably why they priced him so low. It'll be interesting. We'll have to keep an eye out for them and see who will be taking the starting position next season. Up next, we got Chelsea. Mason Mount, 8 million. I think it's a great price for him. To be honest, I don't see anything else. I think like anything more would have been too much. I think anything less would have been too little. So I think 8 million, perfect price point for him. As we move on to the video, it's going to go straight into James, I believe. James at 6 million is a deal and a half. I was expecting James to be around 6.5, maybe even 7 if they really wanted to get crazy. So 6 million for James is an absolute steal in my opinion. Definitely gonna be in the game week 1 team. I know he had some injury problems last season, but I think he's definitely a great option for this season. Moving on, I think they show Ben Chilwell afterwards, also 6 million. Surprising, but maybe not unsurprising. I mean, him and James both being at the same price point seems a little bit insane to me because although Chilwell did get a lot of points per game last season, they were usually against bottom half teams, and he only played I think 5 or 6 games last season. I can't remember the actual number, but he didn't play very many because he was injured so much. So 6 million I think is a little bit too expensive in comparison to James. I think Chilwell should have been 6 million. I think James should have been 6.5 million. That's just my opinion. So I think that since James is at 6 million, I think he's definitely worthwhile. Take a look at. Definitely keep on the watch list. Moving on to the rest of their team. Really, there's nothing too much to write home about. Havertz at 8 million maybe could be potentially be an option, but he is a forward now, so less points for goals, and he takes up a lot of your budget for a forward, so probably not. Pulisic at 6 million is also pretty interesting, but they're looking at the likes of Rafinha, Neymar. They're talking about bringing Ronaldo in, so I really don't think Pulisic has much room in that team. If I'm totally honest, the one that definitely catches my eye though, Benjamin Mendy at 5 million. I think is a great price for him. I think if you're going to get a 5.0 million keeper in the season, I think he's the one you bring in. To be honest, in my opinion, I don't see anybody else even competing with him. I know that he didn't get as many points as some of the other keepers, but he missed some time for African Cup of Nations. I think if you bring him into your team, I think he could definitely do well. I know that Chelsea's defense definitely looks a little bit more ragged since they've only got Azpilicueta and Silva here. I don't actually know any of their other center backs, to be honest. I don't know if they'll have to go to a 2-back system. Or if they're going to bring in some new center backs. We'll have to wait and see for that in the upcoming weeks before the season starts. But yeah, Mendy at 5 million, great price. Would recommend, I think. Okay, so to start off, Crystal Palace, Zaha 7 million, interesting price. I think that's decent. I think that's probably reasonable. I don't really see any good things, bad things about him. I think it's a reasonable price. That's really all you can really say about Zaha at 7 million. You weren't expecting a price rise, you weren't expecting a price decrease, so staying there, perfectly fine to me. Moving on to the next player, we got Elise. 5.5 million is actually very decent. If Elise can get into the starting 11 and keep his place nailed down, he could be a potentially good option if Crystal Palace has some good fixtures. I think definitely keep an eye out for him for sure. Moving on to the next player, Gehi, 4.5 million defender. Lots of 4.5 million defenders this season. I don't mind Crystal Palace. I think the defense has definitely gotten a lot better since Vieira's gotten there, but I'm not 100% sure how I feel about him, so keep him on the watch list. As we look to the rest of the team, the only players that really interest me, maybe Tompkins at 4 million. He could potentially be a bench option if you really, really are down to the bare bones. But there's so many good defenders this season. For 0.5 million, you got to get somebody better than Tompkins in. Eze at 4 or 5.5 million is also a pretty interesting one actually because he's decent. He's not a bad player, and if he can get into the starting 11, it's very good for him. And then Edouard and Mateta both at 5.5 million. You got to figure out which one is going to be in the starting 11 though, which is unfortunate because they're both about equal in ability from at least what I've seen so far. Excuse me. So I'm not sure about Edouard or Mateta. One or the other could be a good pick. You just got to figure out which one's going to be the good pick, So yeah, Crystal Palace, nothing too much to write home about. I'm not too excited about them, to be honest. Let's move on to the next team. Okay, so up next we got Everton. I gotta say, Calvert-Lewin at 8 million. What are they doing? What are they doing at 8 million? I get it that Calvert-Lewin was injured for a lot of the season last season, but how can they justify raising his price after doing absolutely nothing last season? Because I'm pretty sure he was 7.5 million. He might have been 8 million, and I could be totally wrong, but I'm pretty sure he was 7.5 million last season. So how can they justify raising his price to 8 million? The only reason maybe is because Richarlison's gone, so Calvert-Lewin definitely has penalties now, and he's definitely playing every single game. But like 8 million for a forward for Calvert-Lewin, it doesn't make any sense. An Everton side that struggled to get out of relegation last season, and you're telling me that their forward, a relegation forward, is worth £8 million in this game when you can get someone like Trent Alexander-Arnold for 7 million, 7.5 million in the defense, and he'll get you 200 points in 2 seasons. It's just they're having a laugh. Calvert-Lewin at 8 million is a joke. Most overpriced player in the game. Anyways, moving on. Pickford at 4.5 million. Nothing really to say there. Just meh. Gordon at 5.5 actually is a very interesting price. He was 4.5 million last year, which I think was pretty reasonable back then because we didn't really know who he was. He's come into the Everton side. He's done very well. Kept his place. 5.5 million could potentially be a good option for some rotation. There's actually a decent amount of 5.5 million players this season in that midfield area, so definitely keep an eye out for him. I think that he's definitely someone to, like I said, keep an eye out for. Moving on to the rest of the player picks. Nothing really to write home about, to be honest. Damari Gray, 5.5 million, relatively decent. Dele Alli at 5.5 million. I mean, I'd love for him to be an option, but let's be realistic. He's not going to ever be an option in FPL anymore unless he really turns things around at Everton, which doesn't look to be happening so far. So, looking at their team, nothing really special here. Really, it's going to be Gordon or nothing, to be honest, in my opinion. Maybe Damari Gray if he picks up some form again, but I doubt it. Okay, so moving on, we got not Everton, we got Fulham here. Decorva Reed. I mean, 5.5 million. He's not someone we're picking this season, let's be totally honest. So we can move on from him. Wilson, 6 million. I mean, that's just too expensive, man. Like, there's so many good 5.5 million midfielders we've already talked about. He's coming from the championship. We don't know much about him. I know he played really well in the championship, but does that really justify him getting a £6 million price? I don't think so. I think 5.5 million, it's a little bit more of a conversation to be had. 6 million, I think is just too expensive, not worth our time. Moving on to the main man. Oh, actually, where'd he go? I guess I must have mentioned him, but Mitrovic is at 6.5 million. That's the one I really want to talk about. Mitrovic at 6.5 million is definitely the best player that we can talk about here because he's 100% going to be the main man. Here he is. Mitrovic at 6.5. I think it's a great price for him, to be honest, because like when he's played in the Premier League, he hasn't really done it. But last season at Fulham in the Championship, I think he scored like 40 plus goals. It was ridiculous. So if he can bring that form up to the Premier League, I think he could really, really do well next season. So we're going to have to wait and see how he does. His first game is, like, I believe it's against Liverpool, so it's really bad opening fixtures for him. But definitely someone to keep an eye out for. I think that he's someone I'm probably going to bring in eventually this season, at least once, get my heart broken, and then rage transfer him out because that's what we always do with Mitrovic when he's in the Premier League. Let's see if they can stay up the season. Okay, so moving on, we got Leeds here. Patrick Bamford coming at 7.5 million. Are they joking? Like, I know he was really good in the 2020-2021 season, but 7.5 million. He's been injured all of last season. How is he zero point 0.5 more expensive than Ivan Toney? You know what I mean? Like, I just feel like they overpriced all the forwards this season. Maybe they're going to change the rules. There's been some rumblings about how they might change the rules, maybe make forwards more valuable. But 7.5 million, that's a joke. Like, at 8 million, you can go get Kai Havertz. Or you can have Patrick Bamford from Leeds, who is in a relegation scrap probably this season again. Like, it just doesn't make any sense. They should have probably brought him down. It should have been 7 million. Honestly, at 7 million, I probably wouldn't be complaining. But 7.5 million is way too expensive. Way too expensive. Harrison at 6.0 million I think it's a very interesting player, to be honest. Could be an interesting differential eventually. Melia at 4.5 is also a very decent option. I think he's probably the only option in this team other than Harrison. I mean, there's not a lot going on in this team. The fact they put Christensen up at 5 million as well, I think is a little bit crazy. I think they overestimate Leeds, maybe because Leeds has a big fan base, so they want a lot of players to be expensive and make it a little bit harder for Leeds fans to just have all their players in. Because, my God, like these prices don't make a lot of sense to me. Like Gelhardt is a backup striker. Like he's not going to play every single game. He should be 5 million. 5.5 million makes no sense to me. But yeah, interesting pricing from FPL here. I don't think I'm going to go from anybody from Leeds, probably for the entire season. I just think that they just weren't very good last season, and I don't really see them doing much better this season. So yeah, probably a pretty quick synopsis on Leeds. Patrick Bamford way overpriced, and a lot of their players are just not good enough. Okay, moving on. We got James Maddison here, 8.0 million. I think it's a very interesting price point for him, to be honest. I think it makes sense. I'm not gonna lie. As we go through Leicester, I have a lot of things that I like about what they've done with the prices this season. I think they make a lot of sense. 8 million for Madison, I think, is a very fair price. Around the same price as Saka, Havertz. It makes sense to me. It just adds up. He played really well last season. I think that that's a perfect price for him. So totally understandable. I think he started at 7 million, so £1 million increase totally makes sense to me. So after Madison, we got Jamie Vardy, 9.5 million. I'm really happy with it done with this price. It's made him an actual genuine option again. So last season he was never really an option because he was so expensive. I think he's at like 10.5 million, 11 million, something crazy. 9.5 million makes him a lot more of a reasonable option to pick if he plays the majority of the games. I think he is getting a little bit older. I think he's like 34, 35 now, so potentially he starts playing less and less games to bed in the next generation of Leicester forwards. So it'll be interesting to see what he does if he plays a lot of games. If not, then their backup strikers are very reasonably priced this season. Again, we'll get that in a second. But yeah, Jamie Vardy, 9.5 million. I think it's great value. And this is a very interesting one. Barnes at 7 million. I think that's a great price for him. I think that's probably the best price we could have asked for. I think he was at 6.5 million last season, 6 million, I can't remember. But 7 million is perfect. They don't have any European things to worry about this season, any competitions to worry about. So I think that they're going to be going very hard in the Premier League. Barnes at 7 million, he's going to be playing every single game on that left wing there. So I think he's potentially a great option. I don't know. Last season I said that, and he didn't really do much. So maybe this season things can change and he can actually do well. But yeah, let's see the rest of the prices here. Definitely some interesting players here. So I'm going to look at the forwards first. Daka and Iheanacho, like I was telling you before, very reasonably priced forward line this season from Leicester, which is very nice to see. Then they got a little bit overexcited last season when Leicester did well, and they had like Iheanacho at 7.5, 8 million. They had Daka somewhere around that price too. They were just too expensive. They were never real options. So they're making a lot of players very reasonably priced this season, making them actual genuine options for our teams. Um, so yeah, if Vardy gets injured, they're both very viable options. Look at their defense. 4.5 million for Justin Fofana or Richard or Ricardo, sorry, are great prices for them. I think Schmeichel probably a little bit too expensive at 5 million. If you're gonna get 5 million, you just go get Mendy. But Fofana, Justin, Ricardo, I think those are all great player value picks for 4.5 million. Definitely someone to keep an eye out for is Justin in particular. I think he's a great player if he can get his place back in the team. I know there's still like Castagna as well on that right side or left side. I think he plays both, so you have to keep an eye out for who's actually going to be playing those games. Okay, so here's where some of the juiciest, best prices, probably the best value for money you're going to see this season comes in. Liverpool's players, they look fantastic. Salah at 13 million, probably exactly what you should expect. I think last season he started at 12.5. He was never going to start at 12.5 again if we're being reasonable. So 13 million, still a great price for the man. I think he's definitely in most of game week one's teams. Yeah, great value for money. As we keep going, you'll see Trent Alexander-Arnold, 7.5 million. What does this guy have to do to get a price increase? Like, he's gonna be in everybody's game week one team. He's probably gonna be in my team for almost the entire season again, barring any injuries or crazy stuff happening like blank game weeks and stuff like that. So 7.5 million, like, who is not gonna have him in their team? Like, it makes it too easy to pick him. He got 200 points last season. He's gotten 200 points in the past as well. Like, what does he have to do to get a price increase? Like, seriously, it's insane in my opinion. 7.5 million, way underpriced. Definitely should be in everybody's first team draft. Now this is also a very interesting player here. Diaz at 8 million. So like, Mane's gone. He's off to Bayern. 8 million, 5 million pounds less than Salah. Could be a very good option. If he gets the same kind of output that Mane did, which I know might be far fetched, at least to say now, in the present, but it's a possibility. You can't write him off. Diaz, he played really well when he got in, and he could potentially do just as well if he gets the starting time. He's probably have to rotate with Nunez and Jota, so we'll have to see who is the main left winger and the striker. There's also Firmino as well. I completely forgot about Firmino. So yeah, we'll have to keep an eye out on who's actually going to play all these games. But Diaz, I think, at 8 million is a great option. Looking at the rest of the team, I think Jota and Darwin Nunez too expensive, and their forwards not worth it in my opinion. Allison at 5.5 million, interesting to say the least. I don't know if it really matters to us, to be honest. 5.5 million is like meh, but you're gonna have probably triple Liverpool somewhere because Robertson comes in at 7 million as well. Didn't get a price increase either, so him and Trent both are great options again. We'll have to see if they can repeat what they did last season, which I'm sure they can because they have fantastic defenders in Van Dijk and Kunate and Matip behind them. So like I don't know. I think Liverpool players way underpriced this season, except for their forwards for some reason, which seems to always be the case. Their forwards are always way too expensive. Like Firmino last season, now Jota and Darwin Nunez this season. I guess we'll see if they're actually overpriced. We don't know how well Darwin Nunez can play in the Premier League, so we'll have to wait and see. But yeah, very interesting from FPL here. I think that they definitely should have bumped the prices up on Trent and Robertson. I think they definitely could have raised the prices on Salah and Diaz. So great options there. Definitely keep them considered in your game week one team. I'm gonna have Salah and Trent in for sure. They're almost 100% locked into my team. So I'll have to see who we can build around them. Up next, another batch of fantastically priced players. Holland at 11.5 million definitely brings him into contention for the game week one squad. The only player you may be bringing instead of him is Harry Kane, but I mean 11.5 million for Man City's main striker next season is definitely viable. You know what I mean? Their first game is against West Ham, while Tottenham's is against Southampton. So you could, if you want to book in a transfer right away, which I don't really recommend, but if you do want to book in a transfer right away, you could bring in Harry Kane for the game week one team, and then transfer him out for Holland in game week two for no extra cost. You just gotta make sure at least the first two game weeks are looking really good for you, and you're not worried about rotation or anything like that from the rest of your team. But yeah, Holland, 11.5 million. It's a great price. Makes him almost 100% necessary from Man City, considering De Bruyne is 0.5 million more than him for some reason. I guess he is Premier League proven, but I just think that they probably should have been the same price. Probably both just been 12 million, just make it simple. But it is what it is. Cancelo at 7 million. I think he's definitely in my squad. It's really between him and Robertson. You gotta flip back and forth. But Cancelo, I think, is definitely the one that's going to be in the squad. 7 million for a Man City defender who can play both on the left wing and right wing, and how attacking he was last season. At least until they get back into the European competitions, when they start playing those again, that's when you may have to consider getting rid of him because I think there's going to be a lot of rotation happening again. So you got to watch out for that. Looking at the rest of the Man City squad, though, a couple players definitely stick out to me. Walker at 5 million, I think, is a great price potentially if nobody comes in. Like if they get Cucurella, it might be a little bit worse. But if nobody comes in defense in the fullback positions, Walker at 5 million, it's a very good price. Very good price. Grealish at 7 million is decent. If he gets some game time on that left wing or right wing, he could potentially be very decent next season. So keep an eye out for him. Foden and Mahrez. I think Mahrez is so overlooked in that Man City team. I feel like he should get way more game time. He is a fantastic player, and at 8 million, he could definitely be somebody that I would want in my team. You just gotta figure out Pep Roulette. You gotta figure out if he's gonna play or not. The one that's really interesting though is Sterling at 10 million. Now he might not be at Man City for the rest of the season. He could be potentially going to Chelsea. So at 10 million, he could be a very decent option, which in a Chelsea squad that I think has a lot of potential. So I think that Sterling at 10 million in that Chelsea squad could be a go-to player. You know what I mean? So definitely interesting options here at Man City. I would definitely keep an eye out for a lot of them. So keep your eyes peeled on them. See what the preseason looks like. Who's playing what players they bring in. It'll be very interesting to see who they bring in and what they do. Moving right on to Manchester United, we just talked about a player who's potentially going to Chelsea and Sterling. We're looking at another one right here in Ronaldo. Reports have come out recently that Ronaldo's looking to leave Manchester United pretty reasonably, in my opinion. I mean, Manchester United, they're not meeting his expectations. I mean, he's Cristiano Ronaldo. He's the second best player in the world, best player in the, maybe not anymore, but the best player in the Premier League, potentially. He's one of the best strikers to ever play the game. So to be finishing sixth, seventh, it's not good enough for him. He wants to play Champions League. He is Mr. Champions League, so you gotta bring him in. If you're Chelsea or if you're Ronaldo, you got to go somewhere like Chelsea. Sorry, let me rephrase. If you're Chelsea, you probably don't want Ronaldo, to be honest. Do you really want a 37-year-old on your roster? Probably not. But 10.5 million from FPL, probably not someone you're going to be looking at all, to be honest. I mean, he might get you goals, but he'll definitely be to the detriment of the rest of the team. So for United's sake, which I know sounds insane because like Ronaldo got so many goals last season, but I think that he is overall a detriment to their team. They could be playing better and potentially doing better as a squad if Ronaldo wasn't there. That being said, he's a goal machine, so a 10.5 million, probably like I said, probably not someone you're gonna want to go for, but definitely someone to keep an eye out for if Man United's fixtures get really good and he's still there. Moving on, they got Fernandez at 10 million. In my opinion, too expensive still, with Ronaldo there at least. If Ronaldo leaves, Fernandez at 10 million is definitely very valuable because, like, when Ronaldo wasn't there before Ronaldo came in, Fernandez was the guy at Manchester United. And I think he could, if Ronaldo was to leave, he could be the guy again. You know what I mean? So if he gets penalties back and he starts playing really well again when Ronaldo leaves, 10 million could be an absolute steal. You know what I mean? So keep an eye out for Manchester United, see what they do in the transfer window, and see what's going on with Ronaldo. Last up in their midfield is Sancho. Sancho, like, I'm gonna give him like the what I'm gonna call the Ollie tax. He probably deserved to do a lot better at Manchester United last season. Like he probably could have done a lot better. He came in at like 9.5 million last season, so a 2 million downgrade is huge. And if he gets any of his Dortmund form back under Ten Hag, I think that he could play absolutely fantastically. 7.5 million is a great price for him. Definitely one to keep an eye out for next season. And there's actually one more player that I want to take a look at here. It's Rashford, and I guess actually Elanga too. Elanga at 5 million could potentially be like a bargain slash steal of the season if he gets some game time, but I doubt it. But going back to who I wanted to really look at was Rashford at 6.5 million. If Rashford can get any semblance of his form back, he will be an absolute phenomenon at 6.5 million. He will be one of the best FPL assets we've ever seen. Last season he started at like 9 million, I think, so he lost 2.5 million. If he starts and he plays really well, he could be an absolute must-have next season. So keep an eye out for Rashford. Keep an eye out for the preseason. See what they're doing with him. See what they're doing with Ronaldo. See what they're doing with Fernandez. Manchester United could potentially be a good team in their forward line. Defensive-wise, I'm not looking anywhere near them, but in their forward line, they could have some decent options that you should definitely look at. Okay, let's move on to Newcastle United. So Newcastle United, I think next season could be a very, very good team. Don't get it wrong. Like last season they did like pretty decent. I think they finished like 10th, 11th, 12th. Next season they could do really, really well. Their defense has gotten a lot better. They've gotten a better goalkeeper in my opinion, and in Pope. So we'll have to see what they can do. But same max spend 6.5 million. Probably not somebody I'm going to look at. Their midfielder options are not really anybody I want to look at, but their defensive options and their forward options are definitely the ones to look at from Newcastle. So let's move on to the next player here. We got Gimaresh at 6 million. I think that's a little bit overpriced. Like I know he did really well last season at one point, but I think that he is not going to keep up his goal returns that he got last season. If that makes sense. I think he got a little bit lucky last season to get that many amount of goals from his position. Moving on to the main man, the one that I want to talk about, 7.5 million. Like I was saying before, how can Bamford be 7.5 million and Calvert-Lewin be 8 million and Wilson be 7.5 million? It just makes no sense. Is it because Wilson was injured last season? Well, so was Bamford, and he got less points. So like, what is the reason here? What is the reason? Wilson's gonna be playing in a much better Newcastle team with a lot more um, potential chances created for him. I think that Wilson is definitely someone we should keep an eye out for. I think he's definitely the main man at Newcastle. Um, Definitely one that I want in my team at some point next season. Okay, so yeah, here are the next batch of players that we've got here. So I think the main two that we're looking at here are probably Trippier and Wood. Um, their defense, I think they're bringing in another player. I think it's like Botaviv or something like that. I can't remember their name, but they're bringing another center back in. So Byrne and Shar at 4.5 million. They could have been great options, but I'm worried that they are going to get rotated. The players that I'm not worried about getting rotated are Trippier and Target. Those could be some fantastic players. Trippier in particular, I think, is somebody that I definitely want on my team. I mean, he's going to be on a lot of set pieces, 5 million defense in a very upgraded Newcastle defense. Like I said, they have Pope in net. They're getting another center back in. They've gotten Guimaraes in front of them. I think this Newcastle team could do really well next season. The other player that I think is kind of interesting is Wood at 6 million. Like if Wilson gets injured, we know Wood can do well in the Premier League, and at 6 million, he's definitely a viable option because that's a very very cheap price for him. Okay, so let's move on to Nottingham Forest. This one's gonna be really quick. I don't want a single player from them. They're forward, no thank you. Johnson maybe at 6 million, but really not really. There's a reason they only showed 6 of their players. It's because none of them are going to be Premier League proven. None of them are going to have any FPL merit. I mean that is almost insulting to only show 6 of their players. They really have like no. Uh, they think that there's no chance that Nottingham Forest is going to be anywhere in our FPL teams, and honestly for good reason because they underprice so many players from the top 6 teams that it makes no sense to go for someone from Nottingham Forest. It makes absolutely no sense. You'd be a madman to go for any of these players unless you're a Nottingham Forest fan, which I mean, congratulations for getting into the Premier League, but like your team doesn't have any FPL assets that are worth mentioning. So we're just gonna move on right now. Okay, so we got another team we're going to go through really fast. I couldn't find the video for Southampton, but they had Che Adams at 6.5. I think they had Ward Prowse around the same price, 6 million, 6.5, and they had Kyle Walker Pierce at 4.5. I'm not going to get a single one of them. You maybe get Che Adams at some point in the season if they have amazing fixtures for long term, but realistically, you're not getting a single one of their players. Even Ramu, I don't know how to say his name, the midfielder at 5 million. If he was like 4.5 million, he could potentially be someone you bring in, but at 5 million, not worth it. None of their players are worth it. I'm not touching a single Southampton player. I think they're probably going to go down this season, so yeah, we'll just move on right away. Again, a very quick one. Sorry, Southampton fans. Okay, moving on to the mighty Tottenham. I've been looking forward to this part of the video, if I'm totally honest, because there's a lot of great value here, in my opinion. Kane, 11.5. Him and Holland could be great rotation partners, like basically picking one or the other. You know, just like when Holland has a bad fixture, you bring in Kane. If Kane has a bad fixture, you bring in Holland. Both being at the exact same price point makes them very easily attainable, and I think that Kane could do well next season. I think under Conte, he's been playing really well. I think that he could potentially outscore Holland in the first 6 games, just because Kane is going into the season knowing exactly what they need to do at Spurs, where Holland is kind of learning what they need to do at Man City, if that makes sense. So I think that Kane could potentially be the better option. But that's just my opinion, and obviously it's a little bit biased because I love Tottenham and I love Spurs and I love Kane. So um, we'll have to see what we can do here. But yeah, then we move on to Son, 12 million, a little bit disappointing. I think that him and Kane probably should be the same price point because although Son did hit like 260 points or 200, I don't know, it was 200 plus points last season, and he was the top Golden Boot scorer. Same with Salah. I think that next season he probably won't be able to do as well as Kane. Like obviously we say that every single season that Son is the backup to Kane and blah blah blah, or not the backup, but like in FPL, if you're gonna pick one, you probably pick Kane over Son, just because he has the penalties and he's the striker. So I mean we'll have to wait and see who can do what better. I think I personally would go for Kane over Son, but especially when Son is a point 0.5 million more than him. But we'll have to wait and see. Maybe Son pulls it off again and goes and scores 20 plus goals again this season, which would be absolutely amazing. The player I am definitely most excited for and is 100% going to be in my team is Perisic at 5.5 million. Everyone was worried he might come in as a midfielder. Everyone's worried he's going to come in at 6.5, 6 million. He comes in at 5.5 million in a Tottenham defense that's going to be upgraded, in a Spurs side that's going to be upgraded, with the attacking potential of a left wing back, potentially sometimes playing into the forward line. Perisic at 5.5 million, great pick, great player. Definitely somebody I want to keep an eye out for, and definitely someone I want in my team. Assuming that the preseason implies that he's going to be the main left wing back. I mean, if him and Sessegnon start sharing it, that's going to definitely take away from the fun of Perisic. But still, Perisic I think is a great player at 5.5 million. Look at the rest of the team. I mean, really the main ones we're looking at are Kulusevski and Doherty. I mean, Doherty at 5 million is a great pick in my opinion. Assuming that we don't bring in another right wing back. I know there's been a lot of talk about Jed Spence, and I feel like there's been other wing backs we've been talking about. So Doherty could potentially get taken out, but if nobody takes out Doherty and he gets to play the right wing back, maybe he's a better option than Perisic, to be honest. We'll have to wait and see because he has no competition over there except for Emerson Royale, but it sounds like Emerson Royale is probably going to be leaving this summer. Kulisevsky at 8 million, I think makes sense. To be honest, I like that he's still a midfielder, but the fact that they have Richarlison come in, we'll have to see what Conte wants to do with Richarlison and Kulisevsky. Maybe they put Kulisevsky at right wing back, and they play Richarlison up front with Kane and Son. You never know. I mean, if they're gonna spend 60 million on Richarlison, you probably don't want him on the bench. You know what I mean? So we're gonna have to wait and see what they do here. But I think this Tottenham team looks very, very good. I'm a little bit disappointed that Lloris came in at 5.5 million. I know that it makes sense because he came second place in points last season, just because he makes so many saves because Tottenham makes so many mistakes. But I really would have hoped that he came in at 5 million. If Mendy's gonna be 5 million, I think it just makes sense for Lloris to also be 5 million. But that's my personal opinion. But whatever, it is what it is. I would like to have Lloris in my net, but unfortunately, that's not what we're gonna get this season. Okay, so up next we got West Ham, the second to last team in this pretty long price reveal list. If I'm totally honest, I probably should have done these as uh, as they came out, but it is what it is. Bowen at 8.5 million. I think it kind of makes sense, honestly. He got like 200 points, I think, last season. One of the top 3 or 4 midfielders. I think you have to price him at that. He's gonna start every single game for West Ham, and a decent West Ham team, to be fair. So I mean, it makes total sense to have him that high. A lot of people are pretty upset about this price, but I think it makes a lot of sense. He probably won't be in my team for much this season, but I think it makes sense that his price is that. Antonio 7.5 million. It seems like that's what they're pricing almost every single forward out this season who is on a decent team and has a decent goal scoring record. So not surprised there. And Agur 5 million. Don't really care about him. The main players I do care about in the rest of the West Ham team, which is not very much, is really just Cresswell. Maybe Ben Rama at 6 million could potentially be good. Last season he had a really great start of the season, but really fell off towards the middle and end. So Cresswell at 5 million though is interesting because he's always played really well in a five back system where he's playing left wing, or sorry, in a four back system where he's playing left back, and in a three back system he's playing more of the left center back role. So if they play a four at the back, Cresswell and left back could be a very decent option. He takes a lot of set pieces, creates a lot of chances, and he scores a decent amount of goals too. So Cresswell could potentially at 5 million be a decent option, but we'll have to wait and see how well he does. Really, that's it though. Kufal could be good, but I think him and Johnson are going to fight for that right back spot, so I don't really want any um, rotation. And then Socek at 5.5 million is not worth it. Rice at 5 million is not worth it. Nobody else is worth it. So we'll move on to Wolves, the final team for the price reveals. Okay, last but certainly not least is Wolves. Jimenez coming at 7 million, I think is a great price for him in my opinion. To be honest, I actually haven't really thought about Jimenez. The more like when I've been creating my drafts, 7 million is actually a pretty good price for him. The Wolves forwards, or the Wolves fixtures are pretty decent to start the season off. For the first 5-6 games, they have some of the best fixtures in the league, so definitely someone to keep an eye on. I actually haven't really considered him. This is kind of like a reminder that Jimenez is a decent player, and at 7 million, he's a decent price compared to like a lot of the other players this season. Saw at 5 million, nothing to be too surprised by. Johnny at 4.5 million could be a good option. I think Semedo has had some injuries, so if Johnny's playing at right back for the entirety of the season, he could, or at least the first 5 or 6 game weeks, then you can transfer him out for another 4.5 million player because there's so many of them this season. Johnny at 4.5 is very decent. Somebody definitely to keep an eye out for, especially if Semedo is injured. Looking at the rest of their team, there's a couple players that really stick out to me. Aiden Yuri. There's not really a left back in this Wolves team that could really compete with him. So Aiden Yuri, except for Marcel, but I think I read or heard that Marcel was potentially leaving or he was injured. I can't remember. But Aiden Yuri could potentially be a great player at 4.5 million. Looking at their midfielder options though, Neto at 5.5 million. I know everyone is super excited, getting a little, maybe potentially too overhyped at 5.5 million for Neto. That's a really good price for him, especially that with their fixtures. I think Neto could be a fantastic budget option for teams this season. So I think Neto is definitely someone to keep an eye out for. Speaking of people to keep an eye out for. We're going to be looking at my team now, just a teaser team, nothing too special about it. It's just a team that I've made that I'm thinking about potentially making my main team. So, but there's a lot to come before the beginning of the season. So let's just take a look over at FPL.team. I'll be right back. Okay, so this is my first draft. This is the one that incorporates Salah, Son, and Holland, and also gives me an 8 million priced midfielder. The bench is super, super weak. Like, let's be honest, Douglas Luiz is not the player you want coming off the bench most weeks. So, really, it's all about the first team here. You got Trent, James, Perisic, all players I absolutely have to have in my team, in my opinion. After their prices came out, Neto, like I was talking about before, might be overhyped at 5.5 million, but I think that he's definitely a decent option. Salah, like I said, Salah and Holland are definitely players that I'm thinking about for my main team in the beginning of the season. So definitely keeping an eye out for them. Saka and Tomiyasu, I think that Arsenal's fixtures just look really, really good. So I think that we have to have at least two of them in their team. And I think Tomiyasu and Saka on that right side, I think are the two players I think are definitely going to start both games. So, or most games, sorry. So keep an eye out for them. Raya, probably the best 4.5 million in my opinion, just because if you're gonna have, you don't want to double up on Brighton defense, especially against Manchester United. So you get Raya and you get Duncan. I think Dunk's a great player. He'd probably be the first one to go though out of him and Tomiyasu. So we'll look over the other team that I have here now. And if I'm being totally honest with myself, this team definitely has a better balance. It's got Trent, Cancelo, James, Perisic, Tomiyasu, and Mendy. It's got all of the defenders are from the top five teams last season, right? And it's got double up on Chelsea, who came third last season. So it's a fantastic bench, or a fantastic defense, sorry. And if you look at the midfield, it's a lot more balanced without Son there. You got Luis Diaz, who's coming in for Mane now, which could potentially be a fantastic player. Saka and Neto still, are two great players. Salah, Kane. I'd probably be holding on to Kane for the first game week. Probably sell him for the Chelsea one, and probably bench James for the Tottenham game, or potentially Perisic. I'm not sure, to be honest. It's going to be hard to decide there. That's going to be a hard game to make decisions on, actually. But then we have their bench is a lot stronger, you know. Like Greenwood's still there, unfortunately, but Douglas Luiz and Undav. I think Undav could have a fantastic season. I think at 5.5 million on your bench, he's the best player to have, in my opinion, there. So it's going to be hard to make a lot of decisions next season, but I think this team in particular is probably the one I'm going to go for and is my favorite personally. So let me know what you guys think in the comments about these two drafts that I've made. Let me know how you guys feel about the price reveals. I would love to hear about it. I'm really excited for next season. I'm happy to be back, and I look forward to chatting with you guys every single week about FPL. Have a good one, everybody. I look forward to the game launching tomorrow, hopefully, and cheers, everybody.